Hey guys, what is up? Will here with more Nerdventures. Sorry we didn't have a video since the collection tour. I've been working on doing a different method to get hopefully a slightly better quality product out there for video reviews and such. So I'm hoping that this new style of kind of filming and showing while talking will be appropriate for displaying some of my points a little bit better, and I hope you guys enjoy it. So without further ado, let's dive right in to today's topic, All-Star Superman. So let me just say first, before I get into the actual book itself, I finished this story about a week and a half ago, and I absolutely adored it. And by that, I really mean something specific. I feel like I've been in, I'm not going to say a comic slump, because I've been constantly or consistently reading comics for, the last month or two or three or whatever. But sometimes I feel as though there are books that you read that you know are good, and I enjoy them, but it sort of feels like work, or it takes energy to pick the book up and read the next issue. I felt kind of that way about Conan in some bits. I'm reading the Eternaut right now, and I'm feeling pretty strongly that way about it, that it just doesn't always seem like it is immediately grabbing me, everything that I read. You know, part of that is because I try to read a variety of things and just get as much knowledge of stuff as I can. And so because of that, sometimes I don't pick something, immediately based on what I am feeling and reading at that moment. Sometimes it's more picked based on things that I haven't really explored yet or anything like that. But the reason I'm mentioning it now is because I really feel like All-Star Superman has completely revitalized my spirit and my love for comic book reading. Not that it was ever gone, but I feel like it really made me fall in love with the medium again. And let me explain to you a little bit of why, because short story, if you don't feel like watching the rest of this stuff, I think this is absolutely one of the best series that I've read in quite some time. The hype is real. Everybody who talks about it online and speaks about how it had a profound impact on their life, especially dealing with depression or mental illness or things of that nature. I think it didn't have that effect on me personally. I just found it to be a very, very well written and constructed comic book. But I could totally see, like I said, it really hit me right down the core and gave me that love for comic books, that kind of pure injection of comic book love. And I could totally see how, if you were somebody who, suffered from any of those problems, that this could really speak to you in a profound way. So, short story. This book is absolutely incredible. I totally loved it, and let me explain to you why it's worth your time. All-Star Superman is, at this point in 2016, only the third All-Star book that DC has ever put out on their All-Stars imprint. It was intended, I believe, to be something along the lines of like an Ultimate Universe for Marvel, something where you could give big-name creators free license to rework and play around with a lot of these character archetypes that DC had in their roster for a long time, but maybe people were afraid to jump in on because of the continuity or because of the lack of knowledge of the character, just these feelings of intimidation with coming to a character that had upwards of 70 years of backstory to them. And the All-Star line never really took off into anything, unfortunately. There was an All-Star Batman and Robin, which is pretty infamous, from Frank Miller and Jim Lee. I have not read that. I've heard a variety of different things. Some people say it's a really quality story, or at least a quality art and worth your time overall. Some people totally revile it and absolutely hate it for what Frank Miller did to the Batman in that particular story. So that was the first All-Star book that was ever published. The second All-Star book was this 12-issue miniseries, or maxi-series, I guess 12 issues is decently long, All-Star Superman, which was from Grant Morrison and Frank Quitely in 2005. It started, and it ended in 2008. And the reason I say that there are 3 All-Stars now is because recently Scott Snyder has been helming an All-Star Batman for DC with the DC Rebirth relaunch. So it seems like perhaps the idea of All-Star is still somewhere in the DC universe, even though since All-Star happened, there have been the Earth 1 graphic novels. I always forget if they're Earth 1 or Earth 2. But there have been a series of Earth One, I'm just going to call them Earth One, graphic novels, which have allowed different creators to tackle Superman, Batman, Teen Titans, Wonder Woman. Grant Morrison actually did a Wonder Woman in that series, and those are intended to usher in new readers as well, without the baggage of the character on it. So, All-Star, I don't know if it's totally defunct. Obviously, Scott Snyder's doing it with Batman. I'm not sure if it's supposed to be the same imprint, because he's talked about how his All-Star really means that it's more of a gathering of talent, because he uses multiple artists on all of these issues, and there's backups and different things like that. But in the original form of which it was intended, the All-Star universe being totally separate from continuity, there were really only ever two different properties launched. This is the second one, and it really totally and truly takes advantage of that idea. And I think for me personally, as somebody who has not been a big Superman aficionado or even passing fan in the past, that is a true blessing and a really awesome way to introduce anybody to the character. As I said moments before, this book is a collaboration between Grant Morrison and Frank Quitely. Up until just my last, 3 videos ago, I always said his name Frank Quietly. I thought that was just his actual name, but it turns out that it is actually a pseudonym, and he goes by Frank Quitely, which is a play on Quite Frankly. So apologies if I had ever said that wrong in my videos before. It was pointed out to me and I corrected it. His actual name, let me find real quick because I don't know it off the top of my head. Vincent Dehan. Vincent Dehan? I am not quite sure. He is a Scottish gentleman, but he is mostly known for his collaboration with Grant Morrison on things like New X-Men they worked on, We 3 they worked on as well. He's also known for doing Jupiter's Circle or Jupiter's Legacy, whichever one is coming out now with Mark Millar. He also did some work on The Authority in the second run, once again with Mark Millar, the second half of the Authority run. And here, he and Grant Morrison collaborate. It's sort of an exclusive collaboration between the two of them. There aren't multiple artists or anything like that, but it is a digitally inked and colored comic book. So the pencils are all done by Frank Quitely, and the digital inks and coloring is done by another gentleman. I believe his name is Jamie Grant is the inker on this series. And so it is a very tight collaboration. Those are my favorite types of comics, when you can get just a team together that really have a vision, and you can just let them loose and they can make something amazing. And they have made something amazing with this book. Like I said, I totally enjoyed it. I'm going to be talking today specifically about the Absolute version. The Absolute edition is what I read. It's a really lovely version of this book. It's one of the better Absolutes that I have seen. It has a dust jacket like older Absolutes tended to have and newer ones tend not to have. So it does have a dust jacket, and the dust jacket, as well as the in the boards themselves, the jacket on the printing on the book, have different covers and imagery from the All-Star Superman run. The covers actually played quite a bit into it, which Grant Morrison talked about at the end of the book, and it's actually a really lovely Absolute edition to me, mostly because there's a great deal of commentary by Grant Morrison at the end. He spends a number of pages sort of detailing almost every character, almost every scenario, all of the different things that Superman goes through, and kind of reading that after reading through the series really gives you an appreciation for the thought and the structure and the way that he tends to write comics. It really, his brilliance comes through in quite a strong way, and I'm somebody who has always loved Grant Morrison. I think there are people out there who have been turned off by him or shied away from him because of his kind of big picture, metaphysical, and sort of world-shattering things that he tries to tackle in a lot of his books. And I will say to you, if Grant Morrison has not been your cup of tea in the past, give him a chance here, because the story that he writes is much more intimate, and the stakes and everything, the way that Superman operates within this universe are, while being large and feeling amazing and awesome, are not so up their own ass and concerned with redefining the space of the universe and the way that we view the society and everything. It doesn't have that type of baggage that Grant Morrison can bring to some titles and does turn some people off. Instead, it really feels like a classic story of a couple characters and the stakes that they have to go through, or the stakes that they have in each other and the way that they interact. It just really feels like the best of a classic comic book story. And so I know classic is not exactly a precise term. It's a hard thing to pin down, and it's kind of nebulous depending on what your definition of classic is or what you think a classic comic book is. But the reason I would call it classic is because, like the All-Star line was trying to do at that time, or at least purported to be doing, it really does get down to the root of the characters. It strips away the entire Superman mythos down to Superman, Lois Lane, Jimmy Olsen, Lex Luthor, and the kind of Smallville Kent family and their existence. And by doing that, it really allows Morrison to focus down these characters and to kind of make them an amalgamation of all the things that he's liked from the Superman mythos, and none of the things that he hasn't liked. And I think he's picked some outrageously good things to bring to these. In past ones, Jimmy Olsen has been a variety of different things. In Jack Kirby's run, he was sort of it got strange. If you look at the Fourth World stuff, he's used in like genetic cloning stuff, and there's like Olsen clones, and they ravage. It's very weird. And earlier than that, he was very much just the kid reporter, kind of a child sidekick, the Bucky Barnes to Superman, that allowed younger children who are reading the book to associate with it in some way. But in this version, he kind of comes off as a much more I'm not sure if mature is the correct word, but they've aged him up a little bit, and his role with Superman and the way that he interfaces with the rest of the characters really seems to make a lot more sense, and it kind of has a more modern sensibility to it with his ability with technology and his kind of super sleuthing stuff. It doesn't feel campy and cheesy as much as it feels updated to be modern, and I feel like that's kind of the way with all of these different characters. Lois is really well done. She comes off as being, independent and interested in her own stuff, and not necessarily just somebody for Superman to save. She has an amazing kind of 3-issue arc at the beginning-ish of the story, which really gives her a time to shine in the spotlight. Lex Luthor is really well done in this. He kind of is this is my absolute favorite Lex Luthor, and I have to say that, as I mentioned before, I'm not the biggest Superman head, but this particular version of Lex, from what I've seen in Superman movies and the brief amounts of Superman comics that I have read, I love this version of Lex. He is very, very insecure in a lot of things that he's doing, and kind of the reasons behind his motivations for being kind of a quote-unquote bad guy is much more based around his feelings of inadequacy next to Superman, and it really gives off just such an amazing contrast to Superman, because like Grant Morrison says at the end of the Absolute Edition, he talks about how he tried to make Lex in this book the most vindictive side of all of us, like the side that really wants to be petty and really wants to be nasty to people that you see as being better or good, people that you feel kind of inadequate next to, like I said before. But at the same time, it comes off as being so relatable in this weird way. It does feel petty and vindictive, but I think the way that Grant Morrison writes it really, to me at least, speaks very directly to everybody's feelings, tendencies towards that. Everybody has moments of seeing people being lifted up to amazing heights, and whether it's in contrast to you, or maybe it's instead of you, if somebody got a raise that you didn't, or whatever it is, something happened to somebody. And it kind of feels like a Smith song or a Morrissey song. There's a song, We Hate It When Our Friends Become Successful. It feels very much like that, and it's so well written and done. It just really feels like that you feel the pain that Lex has for being passed up by all of these people, and to not being recognized for what he really was worth to everybody. And he just comes off as being really relatable in that sense, while also being a crazy supervillain and, you know, unrelatable in that sense. But I think like his underlying motives and the kind of humanization of him is just so strong. And that also goes for Superman as well. I really liked this version of Superman and Clark Kent because I feel as though a lot of times, especially in more recent years with Man of Steel or Batman vs. Superman, Superman can come off as being totally aloof and having these kind of feelings of like, why should I protect the humans of Earth? Everybody is ants, and having that kind of what I find to be a very not interesting plot and characterization of Superman. But what Grant Morrison digs into in this is he really gets down to the roots of Clark as being a Midwestern farm boy, and how being raised in small town America totally affected the values that he holds and the way that he views society and people. You know, he comes off in this as so much more emotionally intelligent as any Superman that I have ever seen before. And it's so refreshing and really nice to see that kind of Superman. You know, it's not like he's looking at people and saying like, I don't understand these human emotions and why is everybody doing this? You all have short lives anyway. You know, that never comes up in it. Instead, you know, he really represents, in contrast to what I was talking about with Lex, he really represents all of the things that we want or really want to be good about us in humanity. And that sounds super cheesy. Believe me, before I read this story, I would have said like, oh my God, Will, what are you talking about? That's so dumb. But Grant Morrison makes it work. And Frank Quitely, you know, right there along with him, with the way they do the designs and the way his face communicates and everything, he just so expresses so well all of these great things that people could be, in contrast to Lex, where it's like, all of the bad things that you could be. And that's what's so great about their dichotomy, is it doesn't seem like either one of them is totally unknowable and alien and foreign. It really seems like, you know, Superman is what you could be if you tilted that way, and Lex is what you could be if you tilted the other way. Like, it really feels like both of them are relatable in that sense. And especially what I enjoyed about Superman and about the way that Frank Quitely and Grant Morrison did him was his Clark Kent persona in this. I thought it was brilliant. It was really, really well done. This is one of the first comics that I've read that differentiates between the Clark Kent and the Superman persona in such a way that really makes you kind of understand the differences between them and really appreciate the way that Clark behaves as a, you know, normal human. In a lot of the stuff you see, you know, like I was saying, Man of Steel, he still looks like the most gorgeous, you know, jacked supermodel kind of guy, and then he puts glasses on and all of a sudden he's Clark Kent, and it's not that convincing. But the way that they've done it here is, Frank Quitely talks about in the back, he put a lot of effort into kind of changing the body language when he was drawing Clark as opposed to drawing Superman, and he makes him kind of look pudgier and just frumpier in general. They really embrace, like I said, that kind of Midwestern simpleton sort of thing. He stumbles around and bumps into things, but it's so brilliant because all of the things that he's doing, you know, all the things that he bumps into and all of the things that it looks like they're accidents to everybody else, it's actually Superman, you know, it's actually Clark Kent doing these little things to help people in ways that they had never realized. And I think it's just so well done, and it really kind of gives you a new perspective of Clark and the way that he interacts with his coworkers, the way that he even interacts with Lex Luthor is interesting because they have they actually have kind of a positive relationship in this, and Lex doesn't know that he is Superman, and it sort of comes off as much more natural and interesting, kind of seeing Lex talk to Clark in this specific way, and not as though he's looking down on him or anything. It's hard for me to explain. I'm being purposefully vague about some of these things because I don't want to necessarily spoil anything. I would highly encourage you read this yourself. But suffice to say that the version of Clark Kent here on display, I think, is just absolutely brilliant in the way that it's characterized and the way that they go about showing the differences between Superman versus the Clark that works at the Daily Planet versus the Clark that's from Smallville and has this relationship with his parents and is from, you know, this tiny town. It's so well done. The dichotomy or the kind of play between all of those versions of Superman, all these identities that he's balancing against Lex Luthor is just really, really smart. And yeah, I loved every minute of their relationship. So now that I've gushed about it for this amount of time, what is it actually about? The book itself is basically a kind of last days of Superman. You know, I'm not gonna spoil anything unduly, I hope. But basically, in the very opening pages of the book, Superman rescues this team of sort of scientists that are trying to scout the sun or some such. I don't remember what the specific of it is. And in doing so, he poisons himself with solar radiation to the extent that his cells cannot absorb. Even for the Man of Steel, it's too much. And so in the following basically 12 issues, he tries to set things up and set things right and set things in motion with all of his different relationships with Lois and with Lex and with, you know, Clark at the Daily Planet. Tries to set everything up in a way that he can, you know, pass on from this world and feel as though he's accomplished what he needs to accomplish. And so I'm not going to get into any further details than that, because, like I said, to do so would probably give a little bit more away than is, you know, worth giving away. But there are really great moments where it kind of has that feeling of like, what would you do if you knew you only had, you know, 6 months to live? And it takes that concept and really gives it these beautiful moments between all the different characters. Like, there's a couple issues where it's Lois's birthday, and Superman gives her something that allows her to kind of see the world through his eyes a little bit more. And it just strengthens the relationship between them in such a fun and interesting way that I'm sure has probably been explored at some point. Like, I'm guessing that it's not a completely original idea that they employ here, but it's just done in such a great way. And at the beginning of this story, Lois does not know that Clark is Superman. So, but she is in a relationship with Superman. She is Superman's girlfriend, quote unquote. And that comes to a head in once again a really great way. There's really interesting stories between Clark and or Superman and the Superman Squad. There's sort of a variety of different Supermen that appear in this. Some of them dating, I think, to Grant Morrison's DC 1 Million event that he did in like the late 90s. Kind of this idea of like Supermen from different time periods. And so there's a couple issues that deal with like different Supermen and how they interact with the Superman of Earth that everybody knows. And then, as I said, there's a couple issues with Lex and kind of understanding what he's all about. And then it all climaxes towards this big event, which, once again, not going to spoil. But all of these things are done so well in these big plot points. Like, it's all great. But the thing that really sells it, I think, is the small, tiny moments in between these large plot points. Like, especially issue 10 in this. Issue 10 is a really lovely issue where it sort of shows, like, a day in the life of Superman. And it kind of has a feeling to me of, like, this is going to sound stupid, but, like, how does Santa Claus get around the world in a night? Something like that. It's kind of like, how does Superman get around the world in a day? And it shows you what he does, basically, in a day while saving all of these things and taking care of people. And it's so just nice and pleasant and kind of uplifting. Once again, not a word that I use often, because I'm generally not one for that kind of, like, you know, inspirational stuff. It's not for me, usually. But it's really done in such a nice, uplifting way, and seeing Superman take care of everything from the biggest threat to the universe that he can punch to death to, you know, the smallest threat in a hospital in Africa that he can help people with. It's such a good, in my opinion, and like good in the sense of morality good. You know, it shows him as being such a good and such as I mentioned before, emotionally intelligent person that I think is missing from so many Superman characterizations. And just the fact that he does, you know, take the time to help everybody that is affected in the smallest way by his actions, all the way up to the biggest way by his actions. You know, a lot of people were critical of Zack Snyder's Superman, and I was as well, because of the way it sort of is just blow everything up, shoot everything, you know, laser vision everything to death, and who cares who's, you know, are sitting around in all these buildings that we're destroying. You know, this book goes to the extent that you need to show all of the different machinations and how Superman is able to take care of all of these people while he is, you know, still trying to save the world from gigantic crazy monsters or anything like that. So yes, coming back to the in short thing at the beginning, in long form, 20 some minutes later, you know, everything that I've said, I just can't recommend highly enough about this book, down to the character designs being super great. I personally love Frank Quitely's art. I could see people not enjoying it. It does have a particular feel to it. One of my friends was saying that, like, everybody looks like they're 100 years old because of the way their facial lines are drawn and everything. It definitely appeals to me. I think his graphic design aspects of his work is very strong. You know, the way he lays out panels is very innovative, and really helps the story flow and kind of break new ground. You know, all the way down to, like I said, the way he differentiates between Clark and Superman, or the way that he draws Lex, and kind of like, you can see him sometimes as being really powerful, and like kind of this pinnacle of humanity, and then other times you can see him as being like really weak and quivering, and you know, all the worst aspects of humanity. So I think personally the art is on point throughout. I think it's great. It might not appeal to everybody. It has, you know, certainly, it's hard for me to describe Frank Quitely's art style. It looks kind of, it looks like everything has like texture and form in a way that a lot of stuff doesn't, if that makes sense. I mean, hopefully I'm at this point showing you some examples of it. You know, and everybody's hair looks kind of weird and strange, like, but I love it. I really do like it. And like I said, I think it fit this so well because the relationship that he has with Grant Morrison is so strong in the way that they can both get together and totally understand what they're trying to communicate to each other. I think it's really, really brilliant. And yeah, I mean, all of this stuff that I've been saying is basically just to convince you to go out and get this book in some form. I mean, the writing is on point. All of the people are so well characterized and just stripped down to their core fundamental things of what makes them interesting characters. And then Grant Morrison's allowed to play around in that sandbox. And Frank Quitely, oh my gosh, I went back to it. Frank Quitely does such an amazing job of assisting him in that, in designing these characters in ways that are so, you know, fun to look at, but also communicate those aspects of their personality through a visual language. Like I said, this book that I read is the Absolute Edition. I believe it has a cover price of $100, and I don't actually know if it's currently in print, like in the sense that you could go to In Stock Trades or Amazon and get a brand new copy off the shelf. I don't know if that's true, but I think you should be able to find it for under the $100 cover price, or at least at the $100 cover price. I don't think that it is, you know, something that's gone up to 150 bucks or whatever, but I also don't think you can probably find it for like the $45 that you might have been able to when it first came out. I would honestly recommend on this one splurging for the Absolute. Like, there are 2 trade paperbacks, I believe, which collect the All-Star Superman story, probably like 2 issues of 6, but the extra bonus material in the back and just the design and the quality of the Absolute itself, I think totally justifies it. I mean, if you can get this for like $80 or under, something around there, I would say go for it, because it totally is deserving of the larger format. You know, the art style and everything is totally deserving of that, and all of the extra commentary and stuff that Grant Morrison provides is just really fun to read and sheds kind of a new light on the way that he thought about a lot of these things. I mean, a lot of these concepts that he talks about go back to pitches that he had for Superman in like 1998 and 96 and stuff like that, and kind of working with DC, trying to make something happen, having it tabled eventually, and then coming back to DC after his new X-Men run to eventually kind of work on that again. And I think my closing thoughts on this would be that this is absolutely the kind of comic that I like, because it places itself and is able to play with things outside of continuity. And I'm such a big proponent of that. I get it, the legacy stuff is cool, and I like it too. You know, I love the idea of sitting down and reading hundreds of issues of something and getting this holistic view of some world. I think that is awesome. I'm not saying that is a bad thing, but I personally, the comic books that tend to stick with me and the stuff that I totally love are things where it's a creative team that has a short and kind of contained run on something and is able to tell a story that is not beholden to any of the junk that's come before it. And this is such a good and awesome example of how this can go so right. You know, being able to strip these characters down to their fundamentals and to rewrite them or at least reinterpret them in a way that is so much more interesting than all the junk that you have to go through to, like, you know, Superman died in the last issue where they left off on that arc, so now I have to resurrect him in some way, and now he's going to be like this, and now he's going to be like this in New 52, and now he's going to be like this, and it's all of those things are cool, and I can get behind that totally. But I think this, to me, is just the purest form of comics delight, when you can have a writer and artist team up, deliver a contained story that just expresses itself so incredibly well and is just able to, you know, fire on all cylinders. I just love this kind of stuff. So if you are somebody who's not been into Superman before, check this out. I think this is an amazing starting point. You know, it basically was a starting point for me, and I absolutely adored it. If you're somebody, like I said earlier, who has not been into Grant Morrison before, check this out. You know, give him a chance on this, because I think this is probably the most relatable thing that he's ever written, while still being high concept in a lot of ways. The way he throws out technology and different concepts that Superman's using is super smart. I mean, very smart and very cool, and it doesn't overly explain anything, but you still feel like you have kind of a grasp of what he's doing. I mean, it's great. It's great writing, and, you know, Frank Quitely, awesome paneling, awesome layouts of everything, and really strong character designs. It just all comes together into such a strong comic book work, and something that I would love to see more of, in terms of DC exploring the All-Star line and really getting us that idea of great creators getting space to play around with stuff. Because when you give smart people and you give intelligent writers and artists characters, they can make amazing stuff. And I think we need more of that and less of relaunches and renumberings and legacy plays and stuff like that. This is the kind of stuff that I truly love. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Like I said, I really enjoyed this book, and I enjoyed talking about it. Hopefully the things that I have said today will convince you to go out and give this comic book a read, because I think it is absolutely deserving of your time. If you like this kind of stuff and would like to see more reviews or preview stuff or different thought pieces by me, please feel free to subscribe to the channel. Leave me a comment on this video if you enjoyed All-Star Superman and why you enjoyed it, and if there are other kind of similar outside of continuity things that I should check out that would be great starting places for characters, because I love that kind of stuff. And also come back in the future. We'll have plenty more content on the Nerdventures channel. I'm going to be giving Patreon updates in the next week or two, and then launching pretty soon after that. So I think it's going to be an awesome and exciting time for the channel going forward, and I hope you all will come along for the ride. Thank you for supporting me so far, and I will see you guys in the next one. Have a good one.